This is Amend and Progress, your go-to podcast from Vidori for all things promotional material review. Get ready for actionable insights, valuable perspectives, and best practices to elevate your workflow and team morale.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Amend and Progress, Vidori's podcast about the material review process. I'm your host, Annalise, and today we're going to be talking about modular content, where it stands today, key considerations for life science organizations as they think about modular content moving forward. Joining me in the conversation today are two experts in this space, one being Alana Goodman, Program and Operations Lead at Decisive Consulting, and Stephanie Taubin, Founder and CEO at Taubin Collaborative Solutions. Alana, welcome back to the show, and Stephanie, delighted to have you here, first-time guest.
It's really good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Awesome.
Excited to be back. We had such a good time the last time. I can't wait to do this again.
I'm so excited to hear you both say that. I'm so excited to I know this is an area that you both have some perspective on. You've got some thoughts on, so excited to dig into the conversation today. Let's give the folks a little bit more background on who you are. So Alana, I know you've been on before, but can you just give a quick introduction of who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I am Program and Operations Lead at Decisive Consulting. I have been there since the beginning of March. Prior to that, I was consulting in industry and content operations, where I spent 13 years building industry MLR and content ops. Everything from launch readiness all the way through to MLR, omni-channel, and field enablement. I have been part of 10 launches in that time, in all varying therapies, and several different organizations, large and emerging. And I think over the years, I've acquired a love relationship. I can't even say love hate. It is literally love, because I love the ability to generate data and make a difference with content. I think, if you watched my last session with Annalise, you kind of got to see, the emotional side of why and how I do this, and how I feel like content is so impactful and important to the messaging to patients and HCPs and successfully serving the populations that life science is intended to do. So I really, feel strongly that this is a space that we can change and create more strategic and specific directive deliverables. I like to call it sort of personalized precision marketing. And that's, I think, where the direction we're moving in, and I'm super excited to talk about with you today. Steph, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name is Stephanie Taubin. I have an interesting career background where I came up through the trajectory of the ad agency world, working on life science and med device accounts, in addition to CPG and some other industries. And then I went in-house to a medium-large pharmaceutical biotech company to operationalize an in-house creative team as proof of concept over external agency engagement. And what we realized really quickly was the success of this team was really built upon whether or not we had a digital asset management system in-house, right? Because this team was responsible for reusing, repurposing, making updates to content that our agency partners had created. And every time that we had to get the original source file, we would have to reach out to the agency, right, to get that file. And it was time consuming, it would cost money. And it also put the piece at risk of being delayed to market, right? And as we all know, time is of the essence to get material into your customer hands, whether it's the patient, whether it's the HCP, whether it's the caregiver. They need that information because knowledge is power. Mm-hmm. So I've recently started Taubin Collaborative Solutions in partnership with Alana, which it was kind of born out of Phoenix Biopharma Group, where I'm consulting and partnering with different SMEs in the industry to really help our clients pull the levers of what they need, right? Do they want to focus on content? Do they want to focus on MLR operations? Do they want to focus on regulatory? Is there an IT aspect that they want to focus on? So helping to bring all of these folks together so that we can really help industry leaders make really good decisions for how they want to move forward in operationalizing their content.
Amazing. I'm so excited to dig into it today. You all just have such amazing industry background and perspective that I think is going to provide a perfect backdrop to the modular content conversation today. But before we get there, I'd like to do this a little getting to know you section at the top of the episode 3, hopefully easy questions just to let the folks at home, get to know you a little bit better. So are you up for it?
Let's do it.
Okay, awesome. So Stephanie, we'll start with you. My first question is, what is your morning beverage of choice?
Coffee.
Any particular way?
I drink it with a little bit of soy milk, and then sometimes I'll put a splash of chai in it.
Ooh, love that. Okay, how about you, Alana?
I live on coffee as a mom of 2 boys. So, but I have Junior. This is Junior. I drink 2 to 3 Juniors a day. And then I have, because I drink probably the equivalent of 12 cups of coffee a day.
We're balancing.
Coffee.
We're balancing.
Yes, I'm trying to hydrate while keeping my brain functioning. But I like Swiss chocolate almond coffee specifically. I hate buying coffee because I prefer my flavored coffee at home. And I have some Splenda and skim milk in it, and I am a happy lady.
It's your that delicious concoction in the morning that just really sets us all up for success, right? Okay, I love it.
Oh, yeah.
All right, next question is, what is either your current or favorite hobby? And Stephanie, we'll go to you first again.
Oh my God, that's such a great question. In addition to taking my dog to the park, which everybody knows, my pup is my life. The other thing that I've recently gotten into is kickboxing, which a lot of people who may see this and know me will be shocked by, because I spent so many years doing yoga that they're like,
okay.
But it's become a passion of mine. Alana knows this because a lot of times we'll have like a touch base during the day, and I'll call her from the car and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm just coming back from kickboxing. So,
I love it. Okay, wonderful.
New passion in life. Yes.
I love to hear it. Okay, great. And Alana, how about you?
I am a mom, so hobbies are really hard for me. When I have time, I'm writing and reading. I don't know that if that's so much a hobby as just part of who I am and what's important to me. I was an English lit major in college. Books and poetry and learning and escapism into historical fiction are probably the things that I do. But other than that, it's keeping my children from somehow killing themselves because they're boys, and safety is not a thing.
You're busy. You've got your hands full. So we make the hobbies work where we can. I completely understand that. Okay, final question. What is one productivity hack or best practice you use in your daily life? Stephanie, we'll start with you.
Oh, you got to start with Alana. I got to think about that one.
Okay, fine. Alana, let's go.
I am neurodiverse, so I use body doubling. If I want to do something and I have minimal motivation to do it because it's not a dopamine trigger for me in some way, I will make it a meeting to do a working session. So I have a friend in Chicago who's a personal trainer who we work on body doubling sessions throughout the week together so that she can do her client planning out for her clients, I should say, and then I can do whatever it is that I have been putting off. And we'll start at the beginning and set goals and say, okay, for the next 30 minutes I want to do this, then I want to have a 5-minute break and chat with you about where I'm at, and then for the remaining time I want to finish X, Y, and Z. And I find that using other people helps me stay motivated and complete the task. And the fact that I'm checking in and setting goals before I even start has been really, really helpful. The other thing is block timing versus doing like specific times that I'm going to do things. I'm going to do housework from 8 to 10 and, email from 10 to 11, and, block timing is really, really helpful.
Awesome. Okay, great. Love to hear that. All right, Stephanie.
Try the body doubling one day.
The accountability.
I would say for me, because, in full transparency, I'm insanely OCD. Every Sunday, it's even hard for me to make plans on a Sunday because, while everybody's out having Sunday fun day, I'm at home actually organizing my home, organizing my office, and organizing my week, right? And really blocking off every day of the week with what I want to do, what needs to be done, and what's the goal that I want to set that day. So that's currently how I'm operating. I'm sure that there's a lot of room for improvement there, even to kind of tone down the OCD. But I find that unless I'm really strict with myself and kind of map my week, versus what's mandatory and then what is like kind of optional and then what's a goal, nothing will get done.
I can relate to that deeply. Okay, yeah. Good deal. Well, thanks for entertaining those. It's just fun to get to know people on a different level and just hear more about you. So thanks for, jumping in on those questions. Let's talk modular content. So much to cover here. We'll see where the conversation goes today. I think, when we were talking about this sort of in a pre-interview setting, it was like, there's lots of nooks and crannies that we could go into. So, I think we'll keep this conversation maybe at a higher level today, and potentially there's some opportunity for us to dig into some deeper topics at, future episodes. But let's start literally at the basics. I would love to just hear from you both how you define modular content. What are we talking about today? What's the definition?
I'm happy to start, Alana, if you'd like.
Please.
So modular content, it's such an interesting topic and it's become a passion of mine. Several years ago, I was at a conference and I remember that modular content was a term, I'm going to call it a term for right now, that was being introduced. And I remember going to the session and I got there early and I didn't really think much about it, but as I watched people flow in, I realized that this was going to become a really hot topic in the industry because it became a standing room only session, which is something I've never experienced before. What's interesting about modular content is it's been introduced as a capability, and I think it's really critical that people understand it's not a capability, it's a strategy, right? The people, the processes, the technology, right? Really taking it back to the people processing technology. That's the capabilities that support this strategy. So I think when you start to break it down into the people process technology behind modular content and how you enable modular content, you can start to really wrap your head around it, right? The only thing the industry is really hearing right now is that modular content is going to allow you to speed up your MLR process and create more personalized content for your audience and get it to them a lot faster, right? So it's no wonder that leaders all over the place are telling their teams, I want modular content and I want it now. Without realizing that it's very similar to building a house. You need a foundation. Right? And if you don't build a house with a foundation, you might as well just pitch a tent. And the first time a storm comes, what's going to happen to the tent, right? That's really the thing with modular content.
Yeah. Alana, what would you add?
That it isn't what you think it is, and that it doesn't do what you think it does, at least not immediately. And it takes so much thought and effort to make modular content work that it almost is going to be anticlimactic in a year or two when everyone says this wasn't worth the effort. And I'm not saying that it's a terrible thing. I'm not saying that the intent is bad. I'm just saying in our current state, our regulations are from the 60s. And what you're asking those regulations to do in 2024 is a stretch. And what you're asking the technology to do is not, right? That moves very quickly. You learn technology and it's outdated by the time you've gotten your certificate printed, versus these regulations from the FDA have been on the books since the 60s, and we use guidances to interpret them and apply them to today. And you want modular content to be the silver bullet, and we are not, as an industry, set up for that to be successful. It has nothing, like, even going back to the basics, it has nothing to do with the technology. It has nothing to do with the capabilities, and it has nothing to do with the overall strategy in and of itself. The execution at a regulatory and legal level creates so many hurdles that unless you have a well thought out, risk tolerant leadership driven strategy, it is very difficult to make modular content work, right? Because it comes with a taxonomy, it comes with business rules, it comes with a sense of trust, it comes with the ability that everybody is performing at the same equal level all the time, and that they're doing everything thoroughly all the time in order to create those efficiencies. So to Steph's point at the very beginning, what are the basics of modular content? The basics of modular content are people, process, and technology, and no amount of over-engineering of your technology will fix a people, resource, and law issue. So
if I can add on to that, Annalise, I do think that there is a space in this industry for modular content. I think that if you're an organization that's, producing your content on a global to local level, which I haven't really seen that much anymore. I feel like the industry is kind of getting away from that. Global to local is a phenomenal modular content strategy, right? That's the perfect example. Another really good example is a mature product, right? That you're not going to put a lot of money behind. That's another really good place to enable modular content. Again, though, you can't enable any of those strategies without actually building the foundations first, right? And you got to start with your people, process, and technology.
So I'm hearing, and we've heard this in industry, it's fast, it's efficient, make the most use out of your time and resources. But if you don't have the proper strategy, foundation, things in place, it's going to be a disconnected task or, strategy you're trying to achieve. And there's not that connective tissue to make it successful. And so could we get into the people, process, technology aspects of this and some key points or considerations that I'm curious just to get your perspectives on here as we think about like these individual sort of pillars of modular content and how they all feed together. So where's a good place to start? Do we start with people?
Let's start with people, because I have just like so many things.
She's ready to go. Okay.
It's like in there. It is in there. So for me, right, the basics to modular content are, on the people side, the appropriate number of reviewers to volume.
Okay.
The appropriate number of reg ops people to execute and send down anything that's considered advertising and promotion as a single line item on Form 2253 down to OPDP. So your downstream needs to be prepared from a people perspective. Your agencies need to be trained and held accountable for their performance. And if they aren't, it doesn't matter what you put into place, because the number of times something reviews also bogs down the process. The quality of what you submit impacts crap in, crap out. It doesn't matter what system you're talking about, whether it is a review system or a data warehouse. Crap in, crap out, guys. Like, that's just what it is. And then training and retraining and refresher training and making sure that people understand what the expectation is, and making sure that people can actually answer complex questions related to your process, because the people are what impact the process and technology more than anything. And then the single most important thing I would say there's two that are tied. One is leadership that is involved and transparently communicates with the team. Not just I'm head of medical and my team are medical reviewers, but I'm head of medical and I know that my team had to do 15 expedites last week and I am not happy about it. And I need you to tell me why you as marketing didn't plan appropriately and my team had to work all weekend to meet your fire drill. That is the type of leadership that I'm talking about. And then the other thing that I think is tied is your operations team having the ability and the backing of those leaders. Those leaders need to enable the operations team to hold people accountable when they don't perform to expectation. The other thing I would say is that people need to understand that MLR are people. And so in order for that to happen, team building is important, and more important, I think, than anything else. And I think I said this before, is you got to break bread with people. That is where people connections are formed. You let your guard down, you let people in, you talk about more personal things, you show people that you are a human being and not a robot when you share a meal with them. And I encourage everyone who is starting out in content ops or creating a new content ops team to focus on team building, because if you are launching a product, those people are going to be together for hours and hours and hours, and they need to trust each other, and they need to know that they have each other's backs, and that they're not going to throw 15 expedites at the reviewer because they respect their time too much. And they know that if they do that, they're going to take them away from their child or their sport or their school or their whatever, right? Like, you're seeing them as a person now and not just someone who is a means to an end to get your materials out the door. So I think people is literally one of the most important parts of all of this.
And Alana, you bring up a lot of great points, right? Like, you're talking about the agency and the expedited reviews. And, you know, modular content was born out of the idea of, like, your agencies, you know, you've got these pre-approved assets, right? So theoretically, modular content should, like, eliminate the need for an expedited review, right? Because you're having pre-approved assets that may not need to be reviewed again or go through some sort of abbreviated review. And these are all the things that need to get worked out, right? Because you have to enable your MLR teams to feel comfortable to pre-approving an asset and then being comfortable to not have to review it again and go out to market, which, truthfully, I don't blame these teams for not having that level of comfort. They're on the front lines protecting the company, right? So, you know, that's really critical. But before you can even get to the people aspect, if I can say, you gotta have a robust digital asset management in place. You need to own your content. And what's frightening is the industry has been educated that MLR and DAM are the same, and they're not. Right? The piece that you put through review, yes, once it's final approved, you do own it, but there's nothing you can do with it. It's a PDF, right? And industry best practices really states that you collect your component assets and all the pieces that made up that final approved piece once it's final approved. The idea that it goes in at the time of review, theoretically, yes, it should be ready to be approved, but I think we all know that based upon, to Alana's point, risk tolerance, is a company really conservative or are they a little bit more progressive? Where does the reviewer stand? You've got outsourced reviewers sometimes that may not be fully on page with the organization's philosophy of the review, right? There's so much there that needs to be worked out that unless you own final approved content, you're going to create this constant spin, right? You may have content in your system that's not approved by the reviewer. And again, that's only if it goes in at the time of review. If you bring it into your system, once it's final approved, at least there you have a sound starting point that all your reviewers, whether they're in-house or out-of-house, know that those pieces are approved. Yeah. I think next you're going to need to have a really robust metadata strategy, right? Because you want people to be able to find and locate that content, right? If you don't have a succinct, well mapped out metadata strategy, that's another area that can really take teams down the rabbit hole, right? A really good example is, if one brand decides to refer to their patient or to their physicians as HCPs, and then another one decides to talk about them as the physician, and another one names them the doctor, there's no consistency in how you locate an asset, right? Sure. So I think that's really, really critical. And once you start to take ownership of your assets, you also have rights management, right? That's a critical one that, when you're building your modules, like you want to know how long that asset can be used in the market, right? You want to know how long, where. Sometimes these things are negotiated based upon geographical location. So that's truly the starting point, is having a really robust dam in place to be able to move to step 2, which is.
And I think so often the dam metadata conversation comes later when there's already been so much work done and people are maybe used to doing things a certain way. And so I think it's a really strong point to say, put those parameters in place early so that everyone is on the same page. And to Alana's point around training, when you do have turnover or you do have new members join the team, there's a solid foundation and understanding of how the assets are managed that creates consistency across the whole process. So I think that's really poignant. And Alana, in your comments around the people, that's time, building the team, creating culture around the team, the trust, the understanding one another, the risk tolerance understanding of an organization. That's both time and intentionality. And so I can imagine that some organizations wanted to go all in on modular, but those are pillars of not only modular content potentially, but of just MLR and content ops more generally. And so I think it's just a really important point that the people make up the processes. And if you don't put time into your people, things can go awry. They can go awry, right? It's putting time into the people, I think, just makes such a huge difference to all the points you made around why focusing on just different aspects of your people can really be beneficial. So that was just something that was resonating with me as you were talking through that aspect specifically.
Yeah.
I think
you do a whole session on the people, right, Alana?
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
And, the impact it has on the teams, right?
I mean,
Absolutely.
I've had MLR meetings where people have slammed hands on the table and sworn at, the person running the meeting and, telling people in the review committee that they're wrong and they don't know what they're talking about, but using horrible words and calling them horrible names. And these are things that are pretty widespread when you're talking MLR. Like, this is a commonplace behavior. And I don't think people recognize how personal MLR can be. Because the reviewers are putting their personal time into reviewing your piece, and the marketers are putting their personal time in submitting the piece into the system for you, and their personal time and project managing the development of the piece, of the agency. And they, this is something that their management is holding them accountable for performing on, right? And it's personal. And add in maybe the marketer's grandmother has the disease state that they're working on, and now it's like extra personal. And so you've got to remember that you're working with human beings. All the technology in the world does not take away the simple fact that content operations falls flat without human beings.
Yeah. And if I can piggyback on that, I think,
Please.
Everything that you're saying is so spot on, right? Because if the review and PRC meetings are as challenging as they are today, I think organizations need to think about how much more pressure they're putting on these teams, asking them to actually pre-approve this content, right? Seeing it once, maybe twice, I don't know, whatever. Every organization is going to stand this up differently, right? But I think that, that's a lot of pressure to put on these folks to say, okay, I'm going to pre-approve this image with this claim statement, right? And that this is going to make up a module, and I'm comfortable with this, and we're going to put it in the system and then allow end users to take a set of business rules and pre-approved templates, create their own materials, right? That's a lot of pressure for these folks. Again, they're humans and they're on the front lines of protecting the organization, right? So there's so much thought that needs to go into the development of creating these modules. And again, when you think about, you need to put your foundation in place and make sure that you have a robust digital asset management system. You're getting your assets from your agency, you're curating your DAM, you're establishing a really robust metadata strategy. You've got your rights management. Once you have all that, then you take it to the people and say, okay, people, this is what we own. This is what we want to put together. We want you to pre-approve this. We want these templates. We want these business rules. That's where you're going to start to really feel the pressure of the rubber hitting the road with modular.
Sure. Yeah. So we're starting to creep into, obviously, the people become part of the process. Stephanie, you've talked about digital asset management and metadata. Would you consider those aspects part of the process pillar that we've sort of referred to, or talk me through the process pillar of modular content and how you think about this?
That's a really great question. The DAM becomes part of the process once it's established, right? So you need to go in and create a library of all of your images, your graphs, it could be icons, whatever it is, right? You need to create this library. And then you want to be able to tag each of those pieces in a way that it's going to be searchable and findable to the end user, right? That's your metadata strategy. And then you need to also make sure that you've got your license agreements that go with it, right? Because that's the other risk factor in modular content, or just in producing content in general, right?
Yeah.
So, once that's well established, then it becomes part of the process, right? Because the process then becomes, okay, this is what's in my library. What, in collaboration with my medical, legal, regulatory teams, in collaboration with my agency, in collaboration with my analytics teams, do we want to put together that's going to enable really quick development of the content, review and approve of the content, dissemination of the content, and then let's not forget the measuring of the content, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's really critical and could probably have its own session as well, right? Because
Yep.
you need to have really robust data to drive your content development process, right? Otherwise, you're just throwing things against, spaghetti against the wall and hoping that it resonates with your audience, right? So you even need pre-data about your audience, right? Like, how much does this physician know about my product? Are they a believer? Are they a prescriber? Are they, educated? You need that level of data to actually create the content. You need to know, where is your customer in your journey of developing content, whether it's a patient journey, an HCP journey, a caregiver journey, right? Those are 3 journeys that you really need to be well educated on, right? So there's all these ingredients that really go into a very complex strategy. And, that's why I say, like, I always, with my clients, I'm like, let's chunk it out so that it doesn't become so overwhelming and we're drinking from a fire hose, right? Like, again, if you want a really good, well-built house, you got to start with the basics and the foundation.
Yep.
And I think to that point, Steph, right? Like, the foundation of your process is trust. You need to trust that the reviewers are doing their job, that they're checking the references, that they're verifying the information is correct. You need to trust that the submitters are checking what the agency is submitting into the system, and that project manager or marketer, is verifying that the quality is at standard, submission standard, and this is the type of material I would want out in the public if I had the chance, right? And you're trusting that the agency understands that they need to submit quality materials that meet the standard, and that if it's a second round review, they're implementing all requested changes and showing the reviewers that those changes are implemented. If those things cannot be believed to be true at all times, then you cannot move on to modular content, because there is no way that your regulatory reviewer is going to be comfortable a month later, after they just worked with an agency who submitted a slide deck through 6 rounds of reviews, never implemented the comments. The project owner couldn't answer any questions about the strategy around why the piece was being used and who the audience was. And so that piece has come through 3, 4, 5, 6 times, and it still is not approved to be used and disseminated outside of the business. Why is that? Why would I, as a reviewer, trust 4 weeks later that now things are different, and because I said that these business rules are in place, that you are following that? Because no best practice, no SOP language, no work instruction is ever going to be a substitute for training and enforcement and accountability. It just isn't. And if those things can't be believed as true at the most basic level, it doesn't matter. Modular content will fall on its face. You're trying to over-engineer a people problem again.
Yeah. But Alana, let me ask you a question, right? Like, is it the reviewer doing all the checking, or is it, before it gets to the reviewer, there's a whole slew of people that are involved in creating that content, right? So I don't always look at the reviewers. To their credit, reviewers, and very much like what you said earlier, a lot of times they're getting material that they're asked to review and approve that,
it's not review ready. Yeah.
It's not review ready, or it's not compliant, right? Like, a lot of times folks want to push the envelope and push the boundaries as to what they can say and what they can do on behalf of, like, really getting this piece into the hands of the customer, right? But the reviewers are the ones that are on the front lines saying, you know what, like, no, I'm not going to approve this because it's not compliant, and it's my job to keep the organization from getting in trouble.
And then they're vilified by the marketers or the
by,
agency for taking that stance, right?
yeah,
And then they are forced to either find a
absolutely.
compromise to make it work, to make marketing and leadership happy, or they are demonized and considered difficult to work with, even though the intent is only to make it compliant and usable in an external fashion. And they don't understand that they're trying to move in the same direction. They're just speaking two different languages.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And that is why, again, Annalise, I know I bring it back to having a robust, compliant asset management system, but I do believe, and I've seen it with my own eyes with a client that I worked with over in Europe, that once the reviewers realized that, oh, we have a system in place where all of the assets that I have approved, right, not going in before the review, but going in after the review, so that they know that they are approved, they are compliant, they are tagged, and they've got the rights management, then you start to feel a little bit of the pressure in the room come down, right? Because they're like, okay, I know that the content being pulled from the system is approved by me.
Which helps reinforce that trust that everyone has vetted and confirmed that this is what I approved. We're using it in the way that I, was said was going to be used. I think, I mean, the trust thing continues to
modular content is a trust fall. That's what I call it. Modular content is a trust fall.
It's like the new video that's going around of all the churches that are doing the trust fall and letting people fall. No. That's modular content. They're like, don't trust in man, trust in God. Come to church on Sunday. But what they do is stand behind someone and they're like, all right, trust fall. And then they step out of the way and they're like, see, you can't trust man. You should come to church on Sunday. So modular content's very similar to that.
I mean, there's by naturally, as we're going through this conversation, it comes back to trust. It comes that's always. Not a mistake. That's not that's very much because it's a core tenet of how this modular content strategy can come to life. And I think, as you've been talking through this, it's starting to illuminate how you can't just turn on modular content.
No, you
can't just turn it on. It's all of the, I mean, we haven't even gotten to the technology piece, right? There's just so many factors, buy-in, understanding, consensus. This is something you work on and iterate on. And it is everyone agrees that it's worth the time and resources to do. And so I think just even up to this point, the conversation illuminates the fact that you can't just this is not something to turn on because you saw a session on it and it looks, really sexy and it looks like it'd be super great. And let's do it. It's just not how it works in reality.
Right. And there's a core tenet of this that we haven't even talked about, right? How are you going to put the modular content together, right? You need an additional piece of technology for that.
Yep.
Right? Yep. Because no technology that is going to store your asset, or actually, I do think that there are solutions out there that may be trying to work on this, but no solution currently that I'm aware of that can house, store, centralize, tag your asset is also going to author your piece, right? So now you need an authoring tool, which again, additional time, money, right? In vetting, you got to bring procurement in, you got to vet different solutions, then you got to spend time and money implementing the solution, then you got to buy the licenses, then you got to work on your change management, and then you got to work on your training and adoption. There's just, again, so much that goes into it that it really needs its own roadmap that's going to give organizations the time to really look at the various places that they need to go to on the roadmap and say, are we ready for this? Can we meet this step? There's no question everybody can get a digital asset management system in place and get that to me is the low hanging fruit right there, right? And that is going to enable anything. It's going to enable modular content. It's going to enable, omni-channel. To have that in place, you can do so much already, right? That's asset reuse, which is going to drive the reduction of costs and time. Then you need to say, okay, what's the next step? It's the development of the modules, the business rules, the templates. Is our organization ready for this? There's a whole change readiness program that
a lot of change management. Mm-hmm.
But it's not even management. Let's take a step back and even go to change readiness, right?
Okay.
Because change readiness to say, who are our reviewers? How many resources do we have reviewing a piece? Or how many brands are our reviewers actually reviewing? Are they reviewing across multiple therapies? Are they reviewing across multiple franchises, portfolios, however you want to, however your organization is set up? You need to take a look at how your MLR teams are currently organized. Are they organized by brand? Are they organized by portfolio? Are they organized by franchise, therapeutic area? There's so much that goes into this team, right? That's already running very, very lean, that a lot of this review is outsourced, right? So that's a place that's going to take a lot of change readiness and meeting with the leaders of these teams. Probably not so much medical, because medical doesn't have as much weighing on their shoulders as legal and regulatory. But you really need to work with these teams and say, okay, what's the org structure going to be to be able to feel comfortable to pre-approve and participate in this development, right? They need to be so involved in the creation of the modules, the business rules, and the templates before you even get to the next step.
Yep. Why not just get really good at asset reuse?
That's a strategy that I have been working on. Alana and I have been talking about it, and we're working with 2 other people right now to actually kind of create this new strategy for the market. Okay, guys, let's take a modular content light approach.
Totally.
Where assets are easily accessible and you can still move very quickly to recreate or update a piece or respond to a marketplace disruption or respond to an HCP who isn't really responding well to the content that's going out there. And just reusing the assets and the content where you're not bogging down MLR and you're also not bogging down your reg ops teams. There's a lot of opportunity there.
It just, to your point, it seems like a modular content light, more accessible. You're focusing on the data, which I know, Alana, you've spoken about a lot in the past around the importance of that and taking that into account. And so, I mean, it just seems like potentially a better starting point before tackling this beast. While I think there's still opportunity for modular content, it's a big, complex, hairy strategy that takes time and intentionality and resources to build. So
you don't get that large of a payoff, right? Without having some large investment. It's just not possible. So, I think it's really good to, if that's your North Star, to say that I want modular content, I want to speed up my MLR, and I want to be able to produce content at scale, that you need to really say, okay, what's the roadmap? How many years, is it going to take for us to get there? And I think that's where you got to start with your change readiness, right? How are my teams structured? Do we have the right resources in place? Are the resources already at capacity, right? How much are they going to be able to be involved? And you really got to bring the entire organization along for the ride.
Ladies, I mean, we could go on forever, right? So I think just to wrap, I think this is a perfect place just to end today's conversation. Again, I think there's plenty of opportunity for us to continue this and talk about the nooks and crannies or more detailed aspects of modular content. But I'm just curious, having said all we said today, what would be like one parting thought or one thing you would want to leave the listeners or watchers with today?
I think for me, it would be, do you have your digital asset management in place? Because once you have that, you really can do so much, right? And it is the starting point of modular content. But then on top of that, do it anyway. It's a really low-hanging fruit thing to solve for. And then start your change readiness plan. Right? Don't go to modular content, talk about change readiness in your organization. Take a look at your teams, take a look at MLR, take a look at marketing, take a look at reg ops, take a look at your agencies, right? Talk to compliance and really start to understand where is everybody in the organization's journey, and then bring them all together and start the change readiness. Don't go to modular content yet, just a change readiness and take the little baby steps to actually get there.
Amazing. Alana, how about you? One parting thought.
I think it would be make sure that you know your why. Why are you doing this? Is it for time savings? Is it cost savings? Is it outreach? Is it prescriptions? What is it that you are trying to solve for in using this modular content? And then make sure that the strategy that you put into place actually supports that at the very onset. Because if your thought is, I can cut down on the number of field teams I have by just inundating HCPs with digital assets, why?
Such a good point, Alana. Such
Amazing.
a good point. And it should, the why is really, and that should have been my answer. It's the why, right? Because ultimately you're creating content at scale, right? You're responding. And the reason that you want to do it is to personalize content to your customers, which means you're only going to inundate them. So you better.
Steph and I had a client in the summer come to us and ask us to support their modular content build out. And their why was not because they wanted more material, not because they wanted their MLR to be more efficient, but because they were over engineering for a lack of leadership and they knew it.
Yeah.
And we said,
Super
we can't help you.
Know your why. I think it's a perfect way to end the conversation today. Stephanie, Alana, thank you so much for your time and just sharing your perspective today. This was so much fun. I personally learned so much, and so I can only imagine that the watchers and listeners at home learned a ton today too. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Good to be here. Thanks.
And folks, the conversation doesn't stop here. Subscribe to Amend and Progress on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching this episode on YouTube and you have a question around modular content, put it in the comments. We would love to know what other questions you have or what other nooks and crannies of this topic area you'd love us to cover. You can follow Vidori on LinkedIn for updates on new Amend and Progress episodes and to join in on the conversation. Until next time, this is Annalise signing off for Amend and Progress. Have a fantastic day.